Okay, we're back. Surprise. Um, we're doing two recordings here in one day. This particular video is being recorded on December 18th. It's Friday night. And I'm going to be disclosing my horror memories. So I talked a little bit in the last video how I was personally or verbally assaulted by another whistleblower on this call where I was invited to be a panelist on a Zoom call where this person had a really horrible reaction to one of my definitions, which is that of space Nazi. I have reasons for why I say things and do things. I've remembered a lot, and I also know that despite how much I've remembered, it's the tip of the iceberg. But I've remembered horrible, 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 horrible things. Okay. I have been suicidal because of these things. And these people did come from the Nuggets, right? Sorry, the camera's got to adjust. But the history and how all this has become is quite complicated. But nonetheless, the Breakaway civilization was started by Nuggets. Okay, and I don't condemn the Breakaway people. Okay, I actually have many memories of living among them. I was one of them. Not only that, but I was a member of their military, so I was a space nugget. And I was programmed. Okay, quite frankly, straight up, I was totally programmed. Someday I'll go into detail about being programmed. I broke the programming a lot. They had to. I was a very high maintenance programmee. Okay, mind controlled soldier. They were always having to reaffirm their programming, which they have to actually constantly do now. I know I'm being manipulated now, and I still keep remembering. And so everything I do is in spite of them. And yeah, but here's the thing, folks. Here we are on Earth. We're trying to defend ourselves. That's the reality. These people are doing things to us where we do not know or comprehend it. Some things we see the effects of, other things we do not see the effects of. And that's some of the things I'm going to go into tonight. If you at all believe the things that I am saying, you may not want to watch this video. These are the things that made me want to stop the pain, okay? Some of these things I cried nonstop for a whole week. Now I've gotten used to it, so I'm not having that kind of a reaction anymore. But like I said, if you at all believe any of these things, you may not want to watch this video, okay? Now here's the thing. The reason why I'm doing this is to help people understand what we're facing. But these people who I remember being tortured, they deserve to be remembered, okay? These things are real. These things happen to real people, okay? I know that the things that have happened to me are bad enough, but I've remembered way worse happening to other people, okay? So the thing about the Breakaway is a lot of the people there. I know that there's a disclosure movement happening there, okay? I know there are dissenters over there as well. And I know there's also a lot of ignorance, even though they have a great deal more technology. Their government still hides from them the things that they're doing. Okay, just like us. So they are largely in the same position that we are. All right. So let's get into it. Okay. So I have divided this into two parts. One is things that they've done to me and things they've done to other people. I'm just going to go into the things that they've done to other people first. Okay. In really in no particular order. So one of the things that I did when I was an American asset taken into deep space with the space nuggets is capture people. Okay, that's one of the things that I did, and I remember. Um, I remember trying to capture so-called kind of quote-unquote divine beings, or what we would call divine beings. And I remember capturing some of those divine beings. But I'm not going to go into that in any kind of depth. But like in another thing that's very strange to this, that might be hard to understand. Well, I wanted to use the mics for this. Is that there are some things about the universe that we don't really understand, and many civilizations have a monarchy. That's their form of government. And in the universe, that is actually perceived to be like the ideal form of government, and typically the king or queen of a civilization is the oldest soul that has incarnated among that people, and that person's job is to help promote the growth and the evolution of that species. And so it is seen as like a service role. And so I remember capturing many kings and queens of uh, different races. And like for instance, I remember an ant queen being captured, and she was very big. I mean, she was probably 30 feet long and 10 feet tall, and she was purple. And that's kind of an interesting thing to this is one thing I've remembered that kings and queens, they usually look different than the rest of the population, and that's how a lot of people will know. And something like that, like their color being different, is something that actually exists. Um, I also remembered one of the prisons that they keep these people in, and this was a damp, dank room that was underground, dark, completely dark, with some low-level lighting kind of coming from the hall. But they had all of these kings and queens in weird forms of stasis. And I remember one elephant king, he was suspended from the ceiling by his chest. So he had like a band around his chest. He's an elephant, okay? Maybe some different species of elephant, but just as smart as us, if not smarter, but in an elephant body. And they had this blanket over him, which I knew was to actually provide nutrients to sustain his life. But his, his upper portion of his body was lifted off the ground, and his legs, his back legs, were sort of touching the ground. And then he had this strange device on his head where his eyes were completely covered, and it looked kind of like bug eyes. And um, you know how bug eyes have, yeah, multiple eyes, right? And where I was at, I wasn't supposed to be, but I went and touched him, right? Because I'm a telepath, and I wanted to see how he was doing. And I just kind of lightly touched him, and you could sort of say I saw through his eyes, and that this device that was on his eyes was a form of sensory overload. And it was designed to completely space him out, if you want to call it that. And he was totally, totally spaced out, overloaded, kind of a weird form of sensory deprivation, if you want to call it that, or it created something similar to sensory deprivation, but he was totally overloaded. And I have no idea how long he was like that, but I got the impression that he had been like that for years. And but in this room, most of the people were um, in some forms of stasis. And I remember this interesting kind of like an eel man, if you can imagine, like I'm sorry, not an eel man, a manta ray. Um, their face, like right, but more like a human body. I remember seeing this man in this chamber, and it was kind of glowing this low level, kind of white, bright blue light inside. That's how I was able to see. And he just looked like he was totally spaced out, just like, like nobody's home, but his eyes were open. But this whole room was filled with people like this. Okay. And I do recall and I do remember that in this room, these are all the leaders of different civilizations. And this is how they leverage civilizations. Okay. They take something of value, and of course, any species is going to value their own growth and evolution, and they love the people who are the divinely appointed. That's how they see it, oftentimes a divinely appointed leader. And so anyway, uh, so that's something they do, is they capture people and leverage people. On that note, if you remember the movie Valerian, is that the right term?
Yeah, I think so.
When you see those kind of beautiful people, they're tribal people, um, I was triggered by that movie. And I think I had watched it before I had really put all the pieces together. But once I had put the pieces together, I had remembered that um, I had interfaced with a species that looked a lot like them, except for they were more blue. And what I would oftentimes tell these people when I was in deep space, because they'll approach them first and see if they want to trade with us, is that I would oftentimes try and warn them, because I was used as a telepath. The Nuggets really don't have the ability to be telepathic. They need like a lot of boosters to make themselves telepathic, and even then they still have to use like 3 people to kind of make their bandwidth stronger. And so because I knew they couldn't hear the conversation that I was having with other species, I would tell them I'm a slave. A lot of times none of them knew what slave meant. When I would explain it, I would say, I'm not doing this by choice. They did not understand that. Like, why would you be doing something that you don't want to do, that you don't have the choice to do? They didn't understand that. And I would try and explain it to them. But this one group that looked just like those people in Valerian at the very beginning, I would tell them, if you can make yourselves big, don't show it. And just right then, they made themselves big. It was like, they could change their shape. And I said, I told you not to do that. It's just they didn't understand that, like, here we are, you're starting to get leveraged. Somebody's going to start making war on you. They didn't have a concept for it. But I would say if you have like a magic power, you can make yourself big or you can make yourself small. Don't show it. But anyways, I would always try and buy time for people. And like usually they would allow people like about 3 months time to gather, to identify their leader or whomever could negotiate on behalf of the people. So anyway, so I would always try and buy people time and try and help explain to them what was happening. But these particular people, they didn't understand And I think that at one point they had decided to not do, uh, this was like 2 or 3 meetings later, they had decided not to trade with the Nuggets. Um, what they ended up doing was making war on a species that was basically one of their genetic cousins. And they were like a very high spiritually evolved species, but they were like in an animal body. And I think it like those little kind of elephant things that that whole movie is surrounding that can make like these little blue pebble things. I'd have to watch the movie again, but those creatures are defenseless. And what they started to do was make a war on those people. That and that's how it brought them into the war. But they're constantly leveraging people. If it's not amiable at first, they're going to force people into situations. And I remember them making war on a lot of civilizations, including blowing up space stations. Um, I should draw this, but I think I did draw it. You know what? I don't know where that drawing is. But I remember them just blowing up the space station. And it was a very eclectic mix of all sorts of people. What was interesting about it is like the space station was like square on the bottom, and then it it kind of came to a circle on the top. And so it had this weird kind of um, I don't know what to call it, but it was a very interesting shape. And then around it was this big rectangle, and that was what what I remember that came through is it was like the spaceship parking garage essentially. But um, I mean, they just make havoc everywhere they go. Um, on that note, okay, to talk about some really horrible things, and some of this more horrible than what I just mentioned. Um, so, on the Space Nugget spaceship, I have remembered um, the human centipede. Okay, if you guys have seen that horror movie, okay, that's a real thing. Okay, and um, so the Draco, right? They have their low-level minions, which are the kind of brown big lizards. I have not heard people talk about this, but I have remembered these much more human-like white things that are very telepathic, and they can also move things with their mind. Okay. Now, I believe that it's probably not a true natural ability that they have to use tech to implement it, but that they have this room on their spaceship where they put a bunch of humans in, and they get like 10 of them in a room, and they forcibly uh, tear apart people's bodies and rejoin them in weird ways. Okay. Um, there's something else I remembered called the human meatball. Okay, so but since we're on the topic of the human centipede, okay, that they do these things, tearing apart human bodies and piecing them together in weird ways, just to create terror, okay, terror in the minds of these people who are experiencing these things. And I remember the Draco being on this one spaceship. So these guys, if I were to describe them in any way, and I've encountered them multiple times, I've had many memories of them, and I remember when I was a child, they would come into my room, but they look more like if you just see them, if you happen to see them, like Dracula, I would say, like they're really white, red eyes. They do have like a squarish head, but they are mostly in human like size. And they wear capes. That's always a fun aspect to a lot of this is capes are like talk about the worst fashion statement ever. Capes are, I have lots of memories of wearing capes, of seeing other people wearing capes. Okay, so anyways, but the human meatball, okay, is something that I saw, which was um, initially used to try and terrorize me. And I was told that an experiment had gone awry and um, that I was to try and go and help. Well, I go into this, well, actually, I just looked through the window at first, okay? But I go up to this window to look into this lab, and I see this big ball of human flesh with 5 heads sticking out of it. And the people were like totally and utterly traumatized. I can't, people go into a really weird place when they're traumatized like this, and they were not conscious at all. Okay, just in a very weird, traumatized, frantic state where you're just so overloaded. And what they had done, because there was blood and guts like all over the rest of the room, what they had done is they had somehow been able to isolate like the nervous system of these people. So their heads, brains, spinal cords, and then they mashed it together in this weird ball. Okay. And um, you're still alive. Okay. You're still alive. And I was able to interface with this one person. I remember, so it was 3 men and 2 women, 1 black man, 1 gay man, and they're all scientists. And I was interfacing with I remember the black scientist male I could still talk to him. And I had asked him what went wrong. And I was initially told that there was a experiment that went wrong, but he told me that they were just working and it was a very inert lab where they're just like mixing like fluids and test tubes and stuff like that. Um, they weren't doing anything experimental at all whatsoever. And then suddenly their bodies are just being torn apart. And that's when I knew that this was a lie, that they weren't doing anything experimental. And I go into the room, I grab an axe, it's like a fire axe on a wall, and I actually run it through this guy's forehead to kill it, to kill this thing. And that thing did die. And when I do that, I see 4 of these snake guys, white snake guys that I was talking about, the kind of Dracula guys, they appear. And that's when I realized, that they're the ones doing this, and they are very angry with me because this thing that they made takes a lot of energy for them to do it, and it's also considered a delicacy. Okay? And they leave livid, and they tell me to clean up the mess. So then I have memories of taking a squeegee and cleaning the walls of human guts. Okay? So that was a really big one. Um, and I remember, well, it doesn't matter. Okay, I'm going to leave that at that.
Can I tell you something
Yeah,
that happened when I was young?
yeah,
I was with my parents. I was really young,
yeah.
and we went to an exhibition.
Okay.
And I won't say where it was at, but it was at a park in a community center.
Mm-hmm.
And it was with my mom and dad and my brother.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all space, well, I don't know if it's space nuggets, but nugget stuff that had been collected
Mm-hmm.
and put on this table, long table. So
What
you'd walk,
about what year was this? Late 60s?
sure,
Okay.
mid
Okay.
even,
Okay.
pretty young, really
Yeah.
young.
Yeah.
Even, and I was wondering, why are they letting, my parents wanted me to see this. And it showed, and I told you this before,
Yeah.
it was dolls.
Yeah.
And it had bodies of another doll perfectly planted into it. Like a
Mm-hmm.
head would be coming out the side. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, So when you're looking at it, it's like your mind goes, that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm this little kid looking at all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I haven't thought about it till,
Yeah.
every once in a while I think about it.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like a Barbie doll.
Yeah.
And it had the Jewish stars painted, they were naked
Mm-hmm.
on the breasts.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just the most horrid.
Yeah.
And then here you are talking about that
Yeah.
is exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
It made no sense. Stuff coming out the groin,
Mm-hmm.
people's heads inside. What's wrong with these people?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did I say people?
Yeah.
What is wrong?
Well.
This is a real memory
Mm-hmm.
with my parents going to this
Mm-hmm.
exhibition, which they never show that now.
Yeah.
You wouldn't, that stuff's been long burned or something
Right.
to show the reality of
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
atrocity, of insanity.
Yeah.
There's no words to put to it.
Sorry.
I don't mean to
I'm
interrupt.
no, no, I mean it's valid
Okay.
and relevant. And so obviously the snake people, maybe you're not thinking, oh, that's not Nugget, you know. The On the Nugget spaceship, we remembered the human centipede. Um, there was both Draco and humans on that. And one thing that I haven't heard really, I don't think anybody confirmed, but I remember that the Draco are actually elite nuggets turned into lizards because they can change your DNA. Okay. So the Draco are Nazis. Okay. Um, all right. So getting into maybe we'll just do like horrible things that the Nuggets have done because right now we're almost into this a half hour and I'm like only like through two things. Okay. Um, but dolls, okay, are a thing, and they're actually part of the breakaway civilization. Plus, I'm getting a headache. I'm getting upset. So, um, but dolls are a thing in their society, and so because I mentioned like how they use it's part of their university system, their education system, where they're actually able to implant you with knowledge. And then you have to go through a process of integrating that knowledge with your current knowledge. Um, Otherwise, it won't stick. But dolls, okay, if you've ever seen Dollhouse, that's a thing. So they can erase your memory and then they imprint on you something. A cheerleader, okay, Sailor Moon, okay. Um, but they don't just use it for sex, they use it for people to do jobs. And when I was drawing one of my moon memories, I remember that I was used as a doll on the moon. And um, I remembered this because I had a friend who I considered a good friend, and she had said something that was not part of my doll memory set. And I like short circuited, and the personality broke. And I came through and I'm like dazed and confused. Like, what's going on? Why am I here? Where am I at? I'm kind of freaking out. And that's when she realized that I was, I don't know what they call it. Maybe doll is the right term. But what came through in this is that breakaway people know that this is happening, that people are doing this, but they think it's only happening to the witting, okay, to the knowing, the people who know what they're doing. That they don't know that there's involuntary dolls, involuntary slavery involved in this. And what came through also as part of this is that the technology is considered to be very new and very risky when you get a complete imprint, a personality imprint like this. And so only the people who are very desperate will do this type of thing because they know it basically fries your brain. And so it's seen as something as very taboo. And she was shocked because she did not think that dolls had real personalities and seemed like normal people. And I remember her saying to like this handler guy of mine, keep her away from me. It was something like that. And I think part of the problem was is that as I kept getting the doll imprint, I kept remembering her and wanting to continue to be friends with her even after she had like rejected me. And so she was getting continually frustrated because I kept approaching her to have like lunch and have a conversation, and she didn't want anything to do with me. Um, so yeah, so dolls are a thing. They know it. They don't know the extent that it's being used. They have this weird form of prostitution called sleepers. And because we know that they can portal people and they can also create states, they can create mental states within a person artificially, including the sleep state, is they will portal you out of your bed and into an auction. And if somebody bids on you, then you go into their bed and you're still asleep, okay? And your body is used as basically a living sex doll, okay? And then when they're done with you, you get portaled back into your own bed. Now, I do remember that this is a thing that is known in the Breakaway, and people once again think that it happens to only witting people. And so I remember that like the women who do this, they will get all dressed up and go to bed, and they wake up with money in their bank account. And it's once again sort of a taboo thing, but it's a real thing. Now, I remember that they're doing this to women who don't know, including women on Earth and men. And I actually made some artwork that's like, like, I am not a sleeper. I am not doing this willingly, because I was going to make a t-shirt, because it's kind of like sexy people everywhere should be wearing this thing so that at least you can be making a political statement if you're getting portaled off world into somebody else's bed. So they disclose this in the, is it Romantics? I hear the secrets that you keep
Wasn't there a show on
when you're
Dust?
talking in your sleep. They show live footage, I think it's live footage, of women being prepped before they go to auction. So watch that for fun. I'm sorry, go on.
Wasn't there an episode of Dust where people were sleeping and they were doing,
Oh, Sleep While You Work.
well, they work. That was it.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Or work where you sleep.
Yeah,
That was a.
yeah. Only they weren't being prostitutes, but they were working while they were sleeping. All right. Um, so this particular memory was what made me cry for like a week nonstop. I remember like mopping the floor on my hands and knees, because one way that I cope is when I'm really distraught, I try and hold the fort down so that David can work. He's been kind of my saving grace through all of this. He's been holding the business down on days where I'm like non-functional. And I remember mopping the floor because I was trying to stay busy and get out of my head as I'm bawling, okay? But this particular memory is about a little boy I met. His name is Andy, and I don't know where this place is, okay, but it is a slave colony. I can only speculate that it's around Centurion because I remember the light, or around Alpha Centauri because I remember the light being very bright, but the dirt was like a very kind of light sandstone. Okay, but instead of building the building above ground, right, they build a hole in the ground and then they build apartments into it. And these apartments were very similar to what I remember being on Titan, um, but there's no doors, there's no glass in the windows. People would hang fabrics in front of those openings. And the weather was such that you didn't need more protection. Okay, it was always kind of like warm, airy, and dry. But I think actually above ground, it was very desert-like and it could get very hot. But I remember there was like a lot of silica in the ground because it was sparkly. But anyways, but this was a slave colony, and these people were very hardworking, down-to-earth people. It's one of the last things that we did when we were still working together. So David ended up ending his tour before me, um, and I believe this to be the late 90s. Okay, but it was one of the last things we did together, and he was a little boy. I want to say he was 8 or 9 years old, and he was dying of cancer. And the mom, a single mom, I think the father had died sometime. Um, she was begging them to cure him. Now, here's the thing: she knew that they could cure him, but they were denying it to him.
Little Andy.
Little Andy. He's a sweet little boy, okay? Just a very sweet little boy, probably of German ethnicity, okay? And I remember, okay, that they like to take the children with cancer because um, the children with cancer, it's like there's a gateway open in their body that wouldn't otherwise be open, that there's some sort of mutation happening in their body, and that means they can do other things with them. Okay, so, but she didn't know that that's what was going on. But, okay, so they wouldn't cure him. I do remember that about 5 to 7% of this population, their children would get cancer. And I remember her begging and begging and begging and begging, and they kept saying no. And so there was a point when he was going to be euthanized, and they were going to come into her apartment and give him a shot. And she had convinced him that this shot was going to magically transport him to a paradise, to a beautiful paradise, where at first he would be the only one there, but he would just wait a little while, and then everybody else that he knew and loved would show up. And she called it Andy's Vacation. And um, that's what she convinced him, that because he was sick and he had spent his life being sick, that he was going to get a special vacation, and that this shot was going to do it. And I was there. So before Andy was going to go on vacation, they threw a party for him. And David and I had to go through um, these portals, several portals, to get to this place. And I remember being chased, and it was like a very long drive, took like about 8 hours, and that we were being chased to get there. But when we got there, we were late, but I had composed a song for him to be played at his special party, going away party. And I can still remember the song. Um, Maybe someday I'll like try and get it back on the piano. Um, but it went like Andy's Vacation, you're gonna love it. And it went like wondrous sights. Um, it's funny, I should have wrote it down. But anyways, it sounded a lot like kind of like a lullaby slash child, just kind of child song, like lots of cute little bells and stuff in it. Um, but anyways, so they gave him the shot and he died. Well, sometime later, I remember a few months later, I remember David was gone in my life and I was struggling with that. Um, I saw Andy, and he was in um, a big tube, okay, with these bright blue lights all around him. And he was not in a 9-year-old body. So he was like super souped up, muscle bound, much bigger than a normal human. Um, and he recognized me. And I still remember the look on his face like, what happened to vacation? Like, he still had a 9-year-old's mind. And he was wondering what had happened to him and why I wasn't saying anything to him and I couldn't say anything to him. Um, so, anyway. Um, so, another thing that triggered me was uh, what's his name? Who sings Is There Life on Mars?
Oh, are you talking about Bowie?
Yeah, David Bowie. One of David Bowie's last songs, Black Star. Watch the video. Okay. All of that stuff in there is real. And I think they're showing real slaves who are being controlled through the electromagnetic frequency. And so you guys know that FOIA, maybe I should have got more prepared for this video, but there was a FOIA where something accidentally was slipped out into this FOIA where it was going into the electromagnetic frequency able to control body movements. So watch Black Star. You'll see people doing like weird worship stuff. All of that is involuntary, okay? But that, and see, they actually show Mars, okay, in that video, okay? Someday I'll do an analysis of it. But one thing I remember them doing is having this tech that can reduce any physical thing into pure energy. And I remember that this is actually tech that I acquired while I was in deep space. And I won't go into who gave it and all that. I'll talk about it some other time. But this device is actually meant to be like a high-end garbage landfill. Okay? If you want to think of it like a high-tech, environmentally conscious landfill. And it's designed like you put this ball and it's small. Okay, it's like this big. All right. And you put it in this particular area where you want to, like, say, get rid of a building. And it takes about a week or so, but it actually will take it'll transform it into like pure energy. And then it takes the energy and puts it back into the environment. So it's like, it deconstructs something and then gives it back to the planet that it was on. And I had acquired this, asking for trade, okay, with this particular race. They gave it basically like to try and get rid of us because we kept pestering them. And the Kaka uses this on human beings, transfers them into pure energy, and then they drink the fluid. Okay. Well, that's also another fun one. So you guys, so far on my list, I've gone through like 1, 2, 3, like 5 things. And on this next page here, I have probably another 20. Well, already we're 44 minutes into this, so I'm probably going to have to break this up into multiple segments because I'm only going to keep this as an hour. Okay, you know what? I'm just realizing I went over some things that are on the next page here, so maybe we'll get through this sooner than later. So I just, something else that I remember that they did with people in captivity. So they have giants in captivity, and I remember giants of like every size, including like a 200-foot size human being, like huge Titan size, all the way down to somebody who's like 12 or 15 feet. And the Titans, if we just want to use that term generically, they use to get into ancient builder structures So I remember this one Titan climbing on this mountain, which is like, ancient builder pyramid or building, and, breaking into it to try and get inside. And, I'm guessing it was probably as a last resort because, they couldn't figure out how to get in otherwise through any of the portals. But I remember them using giants largely for labor, um, for hard labor. Okay. It's amazing what you can do with leverage. Uh, Talking about movies, horror movies that are real, I also remember that the movie Saw is real. And so, like I said, when I finally put the pieces together about what is occurring, I finally realized that what it looks like when I'm triggered through a memory. And I was triggered throughout the Saw movies. I'm not sure which ones I saw, but I had a very tough time watching the first one, like the whole time, like on verge of tears. And here's the thing, part of me wonders if you're seeing real footage. So, I know that they splice in real footage. That's part of how they do their spiritual authorization magic. They'll be showing you fake stuff. Oh, here's a real part, more fake stuff. You think it's fake, you're going, oh wow, that was amazing, or that was whatever you think it is, and you are condoning something absolutely outrageous and horrible. Okay. And that's the thing about the Nuggets. They have figured out how to leverage life against itself. So maybe someday we'll talk about that more. When I was on Typhon, I remembered going through training, uh, and Typhon, wherever it is, it has two suns. I remember the suns being a really important celestial event, and I had this tiny apartment, um, which is very typical of Breakaway, especially real estate is very expensive there. But I did have a food printer, which also serves as basically your garbage bin, so it can dematerialize matter. But, and I think Typhon, like I said, wherever it is also an ancient builder structure. I remember going underneath ground to work. But I lived in like a skyscraper type of thing. And it's on, Typhon is the planet, at least at this point in time. It was very hostile environment, and the little city that we had a big wall around it to protect us from the wildlife. And I remember once looking out my window at night, and I saw this weird half human, half bug creature that was like kind of gray blue, and he had like 4 legs, I think, maybe 6, I'm not sure, but sort of spider-like with like these weird legs. And I remember the connecting telepathically with this thing, and I had realized it was somebody I knew. And so what came through in this particular series of memories was that once again I was discovering the truth about what they were really doing there. They're always doing DNA manipulation, and that they were manipulating people I knew, turning people into things that they don't want to be. All right. Um, Something else that I did when I was, I believe I was an American asset working for the Nuggets. Once again, because I have been traded, and I know that because I'm in like my current frame of mind, like Teah. Um, I remembered a zoo that is used as an auction of sorts, and it's just like a zoo. It's like it had pits and cages. The most of it was, I mean, this is above ground, right? So it was kind of like a jungle planet. Could have been Centurion, I don't know, but Centurion, I do know, is very jungle-like. Okay, um, but anyways, they built like kind of like wooden bridges and walkways floating above the pits so that you would look down and see. But it's interesting, right? Because we think it's okay to put animals in cages and at the zoo because they're lower species, they don't know better, whatever. Um, these people are people like us, but they're of animal DNA. And I remember the environments all being way too small. I remember these beautiful cat people that were very calico and tabby, so like white and um, kind of these beautiful brown spotted and gray spots. Very beautiful. Like you look at them and you go, wow, they're just amazing to look at. Very telepathic, and they were in this very small cage pit thing, and there's like 50 of them crammed in what should have been like five. And they were all just really suffering, and they're just there to be picked for somebody to buy them. In that same zoo, uh, I remember also weird like land whale thing, and he was kept in this weird cage that was completely dark, under underground, and he had no room to move at all. Like his whole body filled the room. And I remember having a conversation with him. Um, it's funny. I'm sure I wrote this memory down. I don't know what book it's in, but I remember him being mad at me for negotiating. And I told him, hey, I'm a slave just like you. He says, you're not a slave anything like me. You have no idea what it's like being in this cage. And just the fact that I could walk and move around in his mind made me like worlds apart, worlds better. He was really suffering. Okay. Um, so it's interesting. I didn't realize, but all of these memories are memories I've had when I was working as an American asset for the Nuggets. So I guess that makes sense, right? Um, so I remember there being a crow type man, the crow, and that this man had endured some sort of um, catastrophe, like chemical catastrophe, a lot like the Joker in Batman, where his face had become disfigured and kind of melty, and that he was very ugly. His mother rejected him. This had happened when he was very young. His mother rejected him, and he hated women. And he thought himself to be so horribly ugly that he would paint his face, okay, so that he would look better. But he hated women, but he wanted nothing more than to be with women. And his job is he was like what do they call like the truckers who go long distance?
Hmm.
Like a long distance trucker,
Mhm.
okay? But he's driving a spaceship, right? And his job was to take the most beautiful of human women, so the women you see as models, okay, and to take them to like 10 or 15 key planets who were interested in this merchandise. And so he would only take maybe 20 or 30 women at once on these long distance road trips to these planets and try and sell them. And it was a regular route that he did. And I do believe that he was living for a very long time. Like, it might have been 100 years for him to go through this route. And it was very lonely. It was just him. He didn't have a crew. Okay, he just had this merchandise. And because I'm a telepath and for whatever reason, people will open up to me or something, I was used a lot to try and get information and quote unquote negotiate, okay, and just like trying and get data from people. Well, then the Nuggets wanted me to solve this problem for them. And what had ended up happening is that he would go on these long road trips and he would come back for more merchandise, and like half of the women were missing. They had not been sold, but they were missing. And they wanted me to find out what he was doing with them. And so I remember, like, I had this very clear memory. I woke up completely frightened from this one, but he, because I'm a woman, was throwing all these like really bad vibes at me. Okay, like he was thinking about hurting me. He was wanting to sexually exploit me. Blah 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 blah. Okay, and this is they want me to negotiate with this person. And I remember one of the Nugget dealers being there, and he's like on his pad, and he's like whatever the fuck he's doing, right? Okay, so anyways, so they're hoping that even if this guy won't tell me, I'm going to pick up on what he's really doing with them. Well, come to find out, I did find out that he was murdering them. Okay, he was terrorizing them, raping them, and then murdering them. And when I told the Nugget that, he wanted me to negotiate how to make him stop doing that. And I remember talking to this guy, okay, asking him what he wanted to stop doing this. And because they want the money, right? They don't care about the women, they just want the money. And I was picking up on his self-hatred that he had for himself because he was ugly and because he was rejected by his mother. Well, I start telling him things that the Nuggets really don't want him to know, but I tell him that they can make him handsome. Okay, he doesn't have to be this ugly guy anymore. They can transform, they can fix his face, and he can be handsome and beautiful and attractive to women. And he also wanted some women permanently. And I do believe they gave him 2 or 3 women, but in this conversation, this guy wanted me. Well, the Nugget started to negotiate with him about that. I started telling him no, and I had some good leverage, and I don't remember what it was. Oh, I won't. I'm not gonna go into that. But I got him to stop wanting me, and the Nugget. That's what the deal was to fix his face. But they made it so that when he does take the women, he can transform his face back into the disfigured face, because that is like a control deal. These women would become very afraid of him and would do almost anything. Um, and so, but when he wanted, he could appear handsome and beautiful to the women that he picked to be part of his crew and to be his sex plaything, whatever. And I do remember these women agreeing to be his crew and going along with it. And that's the kind of crazy thing in all of this, is that these women were just so happy to not be sold to these other races. They just went along with it, selling their sisters into sexual slavery. Okay, so that's more fun. Um, well, we're right at 1 hour. Okay, so there's a lot more where this came from. So I guess this is really part 1 of Teah's horrible memories. Stay tuned for part 2. Anyways, you guys, once again, thanks for listening. Thanks for helping me carry my burden. I do hope that on a positive note, I believe that we are here, Earthlings in particular, because we'll be the ones to stop all of this insanity. So let's help ourselves, let's help each other, let's get past our differences, Let's realize that all this weird smoke and mirrors crap, politics and everything else in between, it's just, it's not real. Let's get back to being brothers and sisters again, knowing the reality of our reality, so we can become the people that we're really meant to be, and to hopefully bring justice and order back to the universe. Because I believe that's what we're at the beginning of right now. All right. Love you guys. All right. Take care. Have a good evening, and we will see you again soon. Good night.